Okay, we're live here with Steve Anderson, professional shooting trainer. And I want to introduce who Steve Anderson is. First of all, he's not your local NRA concealed carry type instructor that teaches you what's into the gun. The bullet comes out and helps you get your permit in a couple hours. Steve trains people to become high level expert shooters that can shoot at a very high level with accuracy and speed at the same time. And they can do that well under intense pressure. Steve is a USPSA Grandmaster shooter. That means he has proven in matches with a judge watching that he can shoot 95% as good as the best shooters in the world. Steve won first place in master class in the production division at the USPSA National Championships in 2005. In a production gun it's like the type of gun you would carry for concealed carry or daily carry. It's not a race gun. It's like a common gun. He's been training for over 20 years. He's wrote 3 books on the subject. He's done 4 now. I need
It's
to
actually
caught up.
fine.
Really? Wow. I'm down a couple of books and I only got the first 3. He's done face-to-face training all over the United States and South Africa. Anywhere else, or did I?
That's it right now. Yeah, we're
Okay.
probably going to be going to Africa proper soon, but yeah.
He's trained shooters to become grand masters like him that shoot at the highest level in competition. And Steve Anderson is the guy that trained me to become more than just a mediocre average shooter and become a much better shooter. So, welcome to the show, Steve Anderson.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'd like to say hi to your audience. I understand you have a lot of folks watching. Hey, guys, how's it going?
One of the things I want to start out asking you, Steve, is what happens when shooters try to self-teach without uh, without getting any instruction? A lot of people think they can learn shooting like a video game. If they just do it a lot, they're going to get better. The more they do it, the better they'll get. What do you say to that?
Well, there's 2 kinds of ignorance, right? There's the things that you don't know, which is one kind of ignorance, and that's okay. The most dangerous kind of ignorance is when you don't know the things that you don't know. And what I try to do at andersonshooting.com is save people years of struggle. When you get into competition, it's very tempting to think, oh, all these guys are doing is running fast and shooting fast. And that might be true on a certain degree to a certain level. But when you get to the upper level, it's so much more than running fast and shooting fast. And I was a self-taught shooter, only because when I started, many of your viewers may not be able to comprehend a world without the internet. But when I first got started, it was still AOL dial-up, ging gong, screech. Remember those days?
Yeah.
And there was no shooting content available online. So I had a gun and I had a timer, and I just set about figuring stuff out. If there had been somebody I could have gone to, it would have saved me at least 6 months of messing around. So if you want to get better as a shooter, it's very, very easy to find an instructor who can help you, again, save years of struggle. The other thing that has to be done is if you're self-taught, we have all these habits that may or may not be productive. And unlearning a bad habit, for lack of a better word, unlearning an unproductive habit takes a whole lot longer than learning the correct habit to begin with. So let's save you years of struggle. Getting better at shooting is not that difficult to do. There's just a few basic principles you got to follow.
One of the things that happened to me is when I finally found you, I'd been competing now and then for about 10 years. I had a shooting range at my house. I made up my own drills and I practiced about once a week for 2 years, and I had a shot timer. I just made up my own drills and I wrote down my times. And in the first couple 3 weeks, I got a little better, and I just kind of ground it out without thinking about it. And then about 2 years into it, I went back and checked. And I wasn't getting any better, and I got locked in that thing where if you speed up, you miss. And when you slow down to get your hits, then you can't get any faster.
Mm-hmm.
And your method breaks people out of that.
Sure. I shouldn't say most, but so much of what we do involves dry fire. And dry fire is very simply taking an absolutely unloaded gun with no ammunition anywhere in the room. It doesn't mean a magazine with an empty chamber, right? It means this gun is completely unloaded. There's no ammunition anywhere around. And you're practicing anything that can be done without firing a bullet. And somebody might think that's crazy. Well, it's a gun. All it does is fire bullets. Well, there's a lot of things going on, particularly in the action pistol sports, that don't involve firing the gun. And the absence of recoil makes a good trigger pull much easier, much easier to understand, let's say. And if you're interested in learning to call your shots, dry fire is a phenomenal place to begin learning how to call your shots. And so I pioneered the first ever book that I'm aware of. And the only reason I say that is because if there was another one out there, I would have bought it. So I know this is the first one. Hey, yeah, there you go. There you go. So in 2003, right after I made Grandmaster, I wrote a book that contained ways to dry fire most of what we saw at matches. So now I can go in my basement and it's free and I can do it as much as I want. I don't have to pay anybody anything. And I can practice manipulating my gun through these exercises. And if you're able to fire an accurate shot and you practice everything else in dry fire, then it all comes together beautifully. The biggest mistake people make is when they're learning, when they get into competition, is if they're stuck at a speed, they have to accept there is going to be a loss of accuracy short term when we go faster. Mm-hmm. And one neat thing about dry fire is it puts you through that time period without wasting any ammo. And it also does it without diminishing your confidence, right? If you're out on the range and you're doing something in 4 seconds, you want to do it in 3.5 seconds and you miss 3 times, you have to decide, is this good or bad? But in dry fire, if you can go from 4 seconds to 3.5 seconds and your shots aren't great, you don't have that ugly reminder of going down and look at your target and your target saying, ha ha, you didn't do better at all.
Right. You know,
so yeah, let's use
that was a big step for me too. When you went into just because you did a drill and it was really fast and you didn't get an alpha, you got a Charlie or even a D, that doesn't mean that was a failure because you were trying to go faster. So if you go faster than you ever have before and you get a D, that's not a failure because you were in speed mode. Your goal was to just go faster. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge leap because a lot of people I talk to, they're like, it doesn't matter what you do, how great it was. If you miss the target, the bullseye, whatever, it has no meaning. That was worthless. And to get them past it, like I got past that with your training, and I don't beat myself up if I do something fast and I'm not right in the bullseye of the A zone. If that was my goal. Now, if I'm trying to get the A zone, then that's the goal. And it might take a little bit longer because it's a difficult shot, it's a long shot, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that focusing on one thing and not criticizing yourself over every little imperfection helps.
Yeah, in anything where we're measuring time in shooting. So I invented what I call the 3 modes of practice. Number 1 is accuracy. Can I make whatever shots required with no time limit? That's pretty easy to get to. So once we can do that, okay, well, we have to get quicker. And if we want to get quicker in a short amount of time, accuracy is going to suffer. And because what you're doing is you're changing what's normal, right? Mm-hmm. If it's normal to draw and fire the gun in 2 seconds on whatever target, that's great. But if you want to get under 2 seconds, you're going to have to give up accuracy for a very short period of time. I got to stress, it's a short period of time. We're not talking about just spraying bullets anywhere for a year. We're talking about 30 minutes, right? Of learning, okay, what does it feel like to get the gun out of the holster and on target in less than 2 seconds? All right, that was a 1.8. That's great. What does it feel like to get the gun out of the holster in 1.5 seconds? And if we do that 1.5, 10 or 15 times, and the body gets used to that new speed, the hits come right back. What most people do is they're at 2 seconds, they do a 170 with a D, and they go, I told you that wouldn't work. We had to slow down and shoot alphas. And that process will take a very, very, very long time. And your confidence will take a beating during that time.
And isn't it true that just about anybody that takes your face-to-face course, by the end of the day or the second day, they're doing a 1 second draw.
The only people that have not done a 1 second shot at 3 to 5 yards are the people who didn't feel comfortable trying it.
Yeah.
78-year-old women have done it. Typically what happens is we get most of the line firing two shots in under a second before it's over.
That's
And
good.
so I do this wonderful, I'm a semi-retired rock star. So I put on my rock star hat and turn it into a big show. And I say, okay, shooter, what would you be happy with for a first shot here at 3 yards? And they say, I don't know, 1.5. All right, 1.5 it is. Let's go. And then the first one's a 1.3, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I've never done that before. Okay, what do you think's possible? I don't know, 1.15. Let's try 1.15. And the difference is it's somebody making them do something that's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And defining success for them. And many times I'll say, okay, if you want a 99, all I need is a safe shot in under a second. That's all I need is a safe shot. Don't care if it hits the target, right? Yep. I even do this thing at the beginning of this exercise where I have the whole line, every shooter there, recite as loud as they can. Yeah, but it was a delta. Let's hear it. Okay, yeah, but it was a delta. Didn't even hit the dang target. Let's hear it loud as you can. Didn't hit the dang target. Okay, we're done with that.
Yeah.
We don't need to hear that anymore.
Get it over with.
Right. Because if you've never fired a shot in under a second, doing it with a good hit is asking too much. If you could do it with a good hit, you'd already be doing it. Yeah. Right. So let's break it down. Right. All we have to do is let the body learn what it feels like to do something it's never done before, and then put a gun in there. It's so simple.
Yeah. I want to remind everybody listening, if you haven't done it yet, at the description of this video, go over to Steve's channel and subscribe, because all these little tidbits he gives out there. And so please be sure and do that before you take off. Somebody asked, what is the title of the book in the comments there? There's 3 books. I'll let you.
So the first book is called Refinement and Repetition. It is a very different shooting book from any other shooting book you may have bought. Number one, it assumes you can make an accurate shot. Number two, it assumes that you're interested in USPSA or IDPA competition. Now, the drills that are in here are very useful for self-defense and some other stuff, but this is a very competition-oriented book. The first drill, for example, drill number 1 is nothing more than taking your unloaded gun and drawing it and aiming at a target. That's the first drill. And you'll use a shot timer to establish what's called a par time. Par time means we have a start tone, and then we program how long we want before a second tone. So if you want to do a 1 second draw, you'd have a 1 second par time. So basically, you're going to start on the start tone, and you want to be on target by the time that second tone sounds. And the whole book is based around taking these par times and reducing them. Because everybody wants to know, how does the timer pick up my shots in dry fire? And there are timers that can do that, but that's not really the point. The point is to finish the exercise before that second tone expires. That's how you know whether you've done the exercise in the right amount of time with no need to pick up the dry fire shots. I hate doing air quotes, but sometimes you have to.
What I liked is once I see when I did your training, I was into the USPSA thing, and then at the end of 2020, the last year that I competed full time, I want to read through my improvement real quick, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Just
briefly here. When I started with your program, I was a C shooter, meaning I was average in USPSA after shooting competitions for 10 years. I didn't shoot USPSA for 10 years, but a lot of outlaw matches and stuff. Okay, so after 10 years being stuck in mediocre, in 2020, I won 5 of the 15 matches that I entered in my division. There was 2 outlaw and 3 USPSA. So a total of 5 wins in my division out of 15 matches. I beat my local match, the guy that was kicking my ass.
We'll call it the local hot dog. You beat the local hot dog.
Yep. 7 of 9 in 2020.
That's great. Yeah.
And I also learned to run the 6-plate rack in under 3 seconds from the sides draw consistently, and my best time was 2.59.
That's smoking.
And then later on, okay, so then when I kind of retired from USPSA for a number of reasons, I got into the single action army and the fanning, the guns and stuff, and nobody teaches that. But I realized the teaching you taught me how to learn, and because I learned how to learn and learned how to train, I knew I could learn anything. And so when I took that on, I took the same principles of the dry fire, the part time on the shot timer, and I learned how to draw and fan from the hip and shoot targets from the hip, and that eventually evolved into the trick shooting I do on my channel, and it's all the same thing. Until you learn how to learn, you're stuck where you are, and
Yeah.
that's what your training did for me.
One of the things I like to do is I like to take shooting and compare it to people's jobs. Okay. Most people think they're pretty good at their jobs. In fact, most people think they're great at their jobs. Well, they went into that job learning little bitty chunks at a time, right? They didn't go try to learn the whole thing all at once, right? The first day is where's the time clock and where's the bathroom? That's pretty much the first day, you know, and then it gradually gets more complicated after that. And then what's happening is they're building confidence as they're learning these things. They don't try to go learn everything all at once and then get angry because they can't do it all on the first day. That's not how it works. Right.
It's not a success or fail on a daily basis to them. They know it's going to take time.
That's right. But in shooting, people try to do that. And what I like to do is break things down. We never have more than one definition of success at a time. And success is always found on the timer or the target. What really frustrates people is when they want to get success on the timer and the target. There is a place for that, and it's called competition. Right. But when you're training, success is normally found on the timer or the target. Either I need to be able to shoot more accurately or I need to get faster. And the key to getting both of those at the same time goes into what I call match mode, which we can talk about if you want to. But in training, it's all about, there's really two kinds of shooters. And maybe this is true in your world too. I'm sure it is. There's fast, sloppy shooters and there's slow, accurate shooters. Right. And fixing the fast, sloppy ones is a whole lot easier than fixing the slow, accurate ones. But if we're slow and accurate, we have to give up some accuracy short term to get faster. And if we're fast and sloppy, that's the best problem to have because that's 100% mental. And I love to work with both kinds of shooters, and it's all about defining success one thing at a time.
I'd like you to talk about the three modes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So
that's key.
Sure. So accuracy mode means I need to be able to make any shot my sport requires, and I don't care how long it takes. Right. That's pretty easy. The hardest shot in USPSA, obviously there's some outliers there, but the hardest shot in USPSA is probably a 25-yard headshot. It doesn't get a whole lot harder than that. And your viewers can imagine the head box of a normal silhouette target. Right. So that's pretty much the hardest shot. You'll see 50-yard shots, but those aren't very common. So once you can make a 25-yard headshot and you can do everything else, then you're ready for what we call speed mode. And speed mode is really about speeding up the non-shooting parts of the game. Right. The presentation to the first shot. Well, if it's a 5-second stage and it's taking you 3 seconds to draw that gun, that's a long time. Right. And draw gets more important as the stages become shorter. Right. So like on a 20-second stage, the draw is not as important, but on a 4-second stage, it's critical. It's super important. So and then so you get into speed mode, and speed mode means there's some part of this game that I need to be able to do quicker. So while I'm studying this, while I'm teaching my body how to do something faster than it currently knows how to do it, I'm not going to worry too much about accuracy. And that's where people really make the biggest mistake, right? We have this foundation of accuracy, so we don't need to worry about that, right? We know you can shoot alphas, not a problem, right? Now we need to get quicker at some other stuff. So while that's happening, let's not worry too much about the alphas. And I want to stress this is a very short-term process. And it requires a very, very, very smart shooter. or somebody who's being guided intelligently. Because if you take speed mode to the match, which means all I'm thinking about is my body and doing things as fast as possible, that's not going to be a good score, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do that in training, it's going to take you a very, very, very long time to get fast.
Because you can't get faster and more accurate at the same time in training.
It's
You
not
go get the
possible.
speed first, and that's the other thing. Nobody wants to believe it. You go get the speed, and then the accuracy comes along. It's not the other way around. You don't shoot perfectly, and the speed creeps up on you on its own. That doesn't happen.
Well, I would modify that just a tiny little bit. We start with a foundation of known accuracy, right? Which means I can make every shot the sport requires, right? And then we go balls to the wall on speed.
Okay.
And so once we have the accuracy skill and the speed skill, accuracy in competition is 100% mental. And that's my other specialty, as you may know,
Mm-hmm.
right? If now that you're fast and maybe trending a little bit sloppy, that's the easy. I can fix that in a 30-minute phone call because that's 100% mental. And that's so much easier to fix because people that are slow and accurate, as soon as you get them to try to go a little quicker, they've lost their secret weapon, right? It's like, well, hell, all I had was accuracy, and I don't even have that, you know.
Yeah.
So getting those guys to loosen up a little bit is very, very challenging. In South Africa, they were like that. South
Yeah.
Africa, they're like alpha, alpha. We must shoot alpha. We must shoot alpha. Well, getting them to speed up a little bit as soon as they shoot a Charlie, this is not working. This is not alpha. Well, give me some time here, pal.
Can you explain what's going on in the mind when you're doing match mode perfectly at a match? What are you experiencing?
How much detail do you want?
A lot.
Okay, I'll give you a lot then. All right, so match mode means I'm going to use my subconscious skill to execute a singular objective, right? So some of your viewers may or may not know, this is basically an obstacle course with targets. And they're not super physical obstacles, but there's walls and there's vision barriers and you got to run around stuff. It's almost like miniature golf with guns, right? Think about putt with guns and bullets. That's pretty much what you're getting into. So you have to learn and memorize how you're gonna do this course, right? Because you get to choose how to do it. So you're gonna learn that and you're gonna memorize it. Okay. And that's a learning process. So now that I know how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to go through these things, I need to pick one thing to think about. Because what I really want is I want all of my shooting skills to be subconscious, meaning I'm not thinking about trigger pull. I'm not thinking about what my feet are doing. And it takes a little while to be able to do this. But match mode means all I care about is seeing what I need to see for every shot as quickly as I can see it. It's not about going fast. It's not about slowing down. It's about when my sights tell me I can shoot, that's what I'm going to shoot. And I think so many people, if they look at USPSA videos or any competition videos, they say, there's no way this guy's aiming. Well, if he's any good, I promise you he's aiming.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like Rob Latham said, I do everything you do. I just do it a lot faster. It isn't like he's and with iron sights, there's different levels of aiming, as you know, from shooting cowboy action.
Yeah.
But you're seeing what you need to see in every case,
Right. And
So
an expert shooter experience in my, not that I'm not a real expert. I got to A class, but
well, let me stop you right there.
okay.
If you got to A class, you are in the top 25% of what a human being can do with a handgun. So don't sell yourself short.
Okay.
Seriously.
I won't. Where was I going with that?
Match mode expert.
No, about the experience when you shoot.
Oh, I'd love to talk about
Oh,
that.
no. Here's what I was going to say. As your skill improves, you experience time differently. You can perceive fast things that used to look fast to me don't look so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'll do a video where I shoot my revolver 3 times really fast. I watch the video and I can see it. It's clear. And people are messaging me. I can't see what you did. How'd you do that? And it's obvious what I did to me.
Mm-hmm.
You learn to see detail a lot more, I think.
Yeah.
And it's not that your eyes are working better, but your brain interprets vision much faster when you develop all that skill?
Oh, there's so much going on there. Basically, when your mind is focused on one thing, you don't have the ability to measure time, and that's why it appears to us that time is slowing down. Uh, I'm sure you experienced this in your career. I'm
Yeah.
sure you had some runs that really felt slow, and you
Right.
just couldn't believe how well they've scored and how quick the time was.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: when I really shot good stages in USPSA, my experience was I remembered the beginning of the stage and the end, and I know that I shot well, but I can't really remember any of the detail in between. I
Do you
just
know
know that I
why?
shot.
Do you know why?
No,
Because we don't remember things that are subconscious.
that must be what it is.
Right. If
Yeah.
if somebody drives to work the same way every day for 10 years, right? They're not
Mhm.
going to remember any of those drives to work unless
True.
something weird happens. Like if there's a car crash or a fire truck turns over or something weird happens, they're not going to remember that. You don't
Mhm.
remember the breath you took 4 breaths ago, but if you
True.
hold your breath for 30 seconds, boy, you'll remember that because that requires the conscious mind. So anything that doesn't require active, you don't remember falling asleep last night
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's a subconscious activity, right? The mind does that on its own.
Yeah.
And I study that stuff. I am so that's really my goal for competition shooters is to get them into a subconscious performance. And boy, they fight it tooth and nail.
Mhm.
They do not. But so just imagine, think about how well you drive with the map on your knee or reading your GPS. That's a
Yeah.
conscious activity. And then think
Right.
about how well you drive when you know where you're going. That's a subconscious activity. You drive much better in that environment.
Hmm. Yeah. That the mental aspect is really a fascinating thing. When you shoot without, when you pay attention but don't try. That was a big thing that I
Hmm.
got from your training too. Is a huge difference between paying attention and trying. Trying is conscious mind, and that's going to be a failure. And
That's right.
paying attention is totally. It takes a lot of effort to pay attention, but you're
Hmm.
not trying. You're watching your body do it. You're just paying attention to what you see.
Do you have any idea how many of your subscribers are male versus female? Would you guess it's a high percentage of male?
Yeah, YouTube says 95% male.
All right, then this is the best analogy. Okay, think about when you were in high school and you could talk to the nerdy girl, no problem. Have a conversation with her, no big deal. But when you saw the super mega hottie, the hottest girl in school, you were unable to speak because you're trying so hard
Yeah.
that you've lost your subconscious skill. You literally can't form a sentence. I remember spray painted Jordache jeans. In those days, it was white Reebok high tops. You and I may be the same age, right? Long curly hair, Aquanet, and I'd walk up to her and I'd go, I could speak just fine. But two things were happening. I had low confidence and I was trying too hard. And that's what makes good performance impossible. With low confidence and high number of thoughts and trying too hard, boy, you'll screw the pooch every time.
Hmm. But you have to go get the skill before you, like, people listening to this. Some of them think, okay, I just won't try when I shoot. You have to develop the skill first, and then you can bring that skill to a shooting challenge without trying.
That's exactly right. What most people do pretty well doesn't require a lot of active effort, right? People that are great at their jobs, they're not trying very hard. They don't have to, oh, we're having a tough day at work, got to really suck. No, they just go with the flow, right? And their confidence is what enables them to do that. Right.
Mhm.
So no, we're not saying that you don't have the skill. What we're saying is if you develop the skill, but your training is causing you to lack confidence in what you're able to do, that's a disaster. And it's precisely confidence that enables you to compete without all that extra effort.
I'd
Right.
like you to explain a little bit about shot calling, because
Okay.
that's something anybody that's listening to this and gets the point. You could work on that. And if you develop the ability to call shots, you'll immediately be faster and more accurate. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. When I discovered shot calling, it is it's the most amazing thing. Basically, here's what happens. My gun is aimed correctly, right? Okay. So I think it's going to be a good shot. And if this is the last thing, I got to make sure I'm lined up on the camera. It's bugging me. That's close enough. Let's just assume it's lined up because the angle's weird. I'll just look at it this way. Okay.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. My sights are aligned. Okay. And ironically, most people, the better this sight picture looks, the harder they want to hit the trigger. Okay. So here's what happens. My sight picture is perfect. I'm going to hit the trigger. Boom. Sight goes down and then the gun goes off. Okay. And I think this takes about 30 milliseconds. Whatever time it takes.
They anticipated, you're saying?
This is a little different than an anticipation, right? Well, let's say it doesn't really matter why it happens. Okay. For whatever reason, when I activated the trigger, I moved the gun just before it went off. And we're talking 30 milliseconds. It's very, very tiny. But
they don't even realize it did it.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. And if they're blinking, they'll never see it because it's the same amount of time it takes to blink the human eye. Okay. Whatever time that is. Somebody can Google that right now and let us know. I think it's 30 milliseconds. Okay. So shot calling teaches you to stay with the sight picture as the gun fires. So if there's a deviation, I see it. Right. And in super slow motion, here's what it would look like. This is my trigger finger. Okay. Sight lifts. That's a good shot. Okay, now look, it comes down and I pull the trigger again. I need to be able to see that. So that would be a low shot. Okay. Okay. And all you're doing is you're watching the gun fire. So you're done with the shot when the front sight lifts, and it's very difficult to see, especially if we have a compact gun, a 19 or smaller, a Glock 19 or smaller, and factory ammo, it's extremely hard to see. But with a little bit bigger gun and a little bit less powerful ammunition, it's a little easier to see. So shot calling, sorry?
Or dot sight helps.
It helps a bunch. Yeah, helps. Dots, yeah. So basically what you're doing is you're watching the sights, not before the gun fires, but at the moment the gun fires and looking for any deviation in those sights before the gun goes off. And if it's, if you have a dot, it's even easier. So let me find a prop here. All right. So let's say this is my dot and this is my target, right? I'll make sure you can see that. Okay, good. Sight picture looks good. I'm going to press the trigger. That shot went low. Okay. But here's how fast it happens. Dot, dot, dot. Probably even faster than that. So that shot went low. This shot went to the right because it moves before it goes up. Right. And that's what tells you where that bullet went is what did the dot do as the gun fired? This is a great sight picture, but if I hit that trigger too hard or something else happens, it's going to go down and then it's going to go up. And
so what's happening is your brain is learning to see more detail.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great because it gives you the ability to know where the shot went within about a grapefruit size margin of error, right? You especially when you're firing quickly, you're not going to plot it down to a quarter inch, but you will know, hey, that one was low. Hey, that one was high. Hey, this one went over there. This one went over there. And then as you refine that skill, and your subscribers can go practice it. All they have to do is take a target on the front of a target stand that's all shot up, and then put a clean one on the back so they can't see it, and then just shoot a shot and then go try to predict what they're going to see.
Yeah.
If they do that 50 times, they'll start to really get a good idea of where those bullets are going.
Yeah, I think it took me. See, I started your thing in the winter, and it's cold here in Montana, so I didn't get to shoot every day. But it probably took me 5 times out on the range for a half-hour piece doing that, and it was real gradual. I gradually started getting a clue, started seeing what was going on, and then it just got better and better. And that year shooting the matches, I used to miss 5 or 6 times in a 140 round match, and I had a whole string of matches with no misses and a couple of Ds, just because I was seeing what was going on. And the other thing it cured for me was I had a bad problem anticipating, and which is totally a subconscious thing. Your subconscious mind is bracing for the shot, and you don't feel yourself doing it, and until you can see yourself doing it. And with shot calling, I got to where I could see the dot dip, And by getting that feedback, I stopped the anticipation. Or sometimes I'd see, okay, I anticipated, but the shot's still in the A zone. I'm okay, but I could at least see what I was doing. It gave me confidence, helped me relax and shoot a lot better.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The human body doesn't like anything about firing a firearm, right? The human body wants to protect you from all this. It doesn't like the recoil impulse. It doesn't like the flash. It doesn't like the boom. It hates all that stuff. So teaching your body that, hey, this is okay, that's its own separate process, you know. And you know, and by the way, shot calling is not about shooting perfect shots. I thought that for a long time. Shot calling is about knowing when the shot wasn't perfect. That's really where shot calling is helpful. You know, because you're just watching your dot, you know, and you can do it quickly too. You know, there's my dot. Everything's good. Uh-oh, that went low. Everything's good. Ooh, that went to the left. Uh-oh, everything's good. Right. And from a mental component, the neat thing about shot calling is when you're really paying attention to it, you can't think about anything else. And that puts everything else in the subconscious.
Makes you calm down.
Yeah. Because you know what your job is, right? All I got to do is watch this thing go off. Yep. Yeah, and I would love to help people learn how to call their shots. Oh, and by the way, dry fire is the best place to do it because there's no recoil, right? You know, you people watching at home, you can practice shot calling right now. Just take your unloaded gun. Did I say unloaded enough times? Unloaded, 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 completely empty, no ammunition of any kind, right? And just operate the trigger and watch the sight as you operate the trigger. If that sight moves as you operate the trigger, that's where that bullet would have gone. And if it doesn't move when you operate the trigger, shot would have went straight. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I did kind of on my own was that when I trained in Carry Optics, which is a production gun, and I was with the 2019, I was shooting a SIG P320, the original gun, not the Legion, so it wasn't heavy. And I would train in the dry fire, and then I went out on the range, and as soon as I loaded that thing, I was like, this is different. I could feel the weight in it. So I took a magazine and filled it full of lead, and I trained with a weighted gun, and that helped me helped me transition seamlessly from dry fire to live fire. And I'd also warm up in dry fire with the weighted magazine on the range until that felt good. And then I just actually I'd warm up with a weighted magazine, then I'd put a live magazine in there, live rounds on my range, and then I would keep a round out of the chamber in dry fire. And so I know it's got ammunition, but I'm just dry firing, and then I jack one in there, and then I just seamlessly transition into live fire. And because of the weight was there, that's where I kind of made a big leap forward too.
Yep.
But you don't want to train with a loaded magazine in the house. You have to use a weighted magazine.
Did you have one of the early 320s that still clicked every time you pulled the trigger?
Yeah.
So that was the reason I bought that gun. I was working in the gun store when those things first came in, and I pulled it and the striker fell and it kept clicking. And I went, this is the best dry fire gun ever made. And of course, they got rid of the click with later models, but those early models that clicked, I really liked those. Oh, and one thing I want to tell people about dry fire, and I'm sure you discovered this on your own. Many of these drills will have you shooting multiple shots. Okay. Should we talk about how to do multiple shots with different guns, or should we leave that out?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So we'll come back to that in a minute. When you're dry firing, everybody wants to know, what is the gap between live fire and dry fire? What should the times be? What you have to understand is the only thing you don't get to keep is the time between shots on the same target. So if I've got 3 targets and I'm going to shoot them each twice, and dry fire, I can go pop, 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 pop. I may not be able to do that quickly with live ammunition because of recoil. But my draw is the same. My time between targets is the same. My reload, if there is one, is the same. The only thing I don't get to keep is the time between shots on the same target, because that's decided by recoil, right? I'm going to have to wait for that gun to be shootable again visually before I can shoot again. So yeah, and if when you get into multiple shots, if you have a SIG, if you have a Walther, if you have a Smith & Wesson striker-fired gun, and there may be a couple others, after the striker falls in dry fire, the trigger will continue to move, okay? So all you do there is you just keep pressing that trigger. It's going to move back and forth. On a Glock, CZ striker-fired, Any other Glock type action, once the striker falls, the trigger is now dead and doesn't move anymore. So in that environment, what you do is you hold the slide just out of battery, and you stick a little piece of masking tape in there between the barrel hood and the back of the slide breech face. Yeah. Just hold it slightly out of battery, the tiniest little bit, and then the trigger will continue to move. And it's not completely realistic, but it will move back and forth. The other cool thing is, in that environment, you absolutely know it's unloaded, right? So just take your unloaded Glock, take the slide slightly out of battery, put a little piece of mask, and that trigger will keep moving.
Yeah.
So it's very good for multiple shots.
Let me ask you about a little problem I was having the last year I competed. It really felt like I couldn't get any better. I know I could, but one of the problems that I was having was I was calling shots. I wasn't missing much. I was pretty fast, but I was about 2 seconds under the winners of each stage consistently on every stage. When your average stage, which is 22 to 30 rounds, whatever, I was about 2 seconds slow. And I'd watch my videos, and all I could figure out was when I got to a position, shot a string of fire, there was a brief hesitation in getting going to the next one. And I was shooting good, but these 2 or 3 hesitations in there adds up to a second or second and a half, 2 seconds.
Right.
And I don't know why I was doing that. I didn't know how to overcome that.
Well, that is the gap between A class and master class. Okay. So you can get to A class and be competitive in A class for sure locally, and maybe even on a state level, running fast and shooting fast. But running fast and shooting fast quits working, and it's the exact same thing happened to me. Right after I made Grandmaster, I had not been out of the state. I'd not been to nationals, and I was destroying people in Ohio, winning matches by 20, 30%. No problem. I go out of town and I get beat, and I can't figure out why. It was the same thing that's happening to you, right? So once you've maxed out running fast and shooting fast, you've got to learn to do things sooner. So when you arrive at a position, most people will have the gun down here by their chest, right? And then their knees will be bent because they've been running. And then when they get there, they'll stop and they'll raise their body and they'll raise their gun. And that takes about a half a second. And then when they're done shooting, they'll lower their body, lower their gun, and then run to the other thing. So if you can arrive at that position with your body low and your gun high and shoot as soon as you get there, keep your body nice and low, and then you can leave and if you can call your shots with no hesitation, and then you can leave that position, you're already standing pretty athletically, and then you just repeat. And what's neat is if there's anybody that's a little older or even out of shape or both that thinks there's no way I can do this because I'm too old and I'm too fat. Well, anytime I do classes, you take the oldest, fattest person there and the youngest, fittest person there, and on the movement drills we do, it's never more than a half second between them. If we learn to do things efficiently. Because most of the moves in the sport now are a little shorter than they used to be. We don't have 25-yard dashes like they did in the 70s. The longest period of movement is going to be maybe 30 feet is about the longest it's ever going to get.
They used to have way longer running positions between.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 70s, it was closer to a track meet. Yeah, it was much, much more athletic. He had to do rolls, and you had to literally climb over walls. It was much more athletic back then.
I didn't know that.
Well, a lot of people don't know that IPSC started out as a law enforcement conference. Did you know that?
No.
So IPSC got started in the 70s. Jeff Cooper was one of the guys, and they would debate law enforcement tools and techniques. And one guy would say, well, I think the 38 revolver is the best. The other guy says, no, I think the 45 1911 is the best. And they'd say, okay, let's have a match. And so the one guy says, you got to stand like this. The other guy says, no, you got to shoot one-handed. Okay, let's have a match. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll see what's better. And that's how IPSC actually got started, was testing law enforcement techniques and guns. That's why we have major and minor scoring, because the guy that wanted to use a 38 revolver got less points than the guy shooting the 45 ACP 1911. It's the only reason major and minor exists, is to test these ideas. And so that's where the modern isosceles came from. So it started out one-handed in the 50s, and then in the 60s it went Weaver, and now it's modern isosceles. Because they're looking at these matches going, okay, our winners are using these guns and doing these things. So these things are now superior, we think, right?
Yeah.
And
the sport continued to evolve, and the best techniques were discovered.
Right. So now we can quit debating it. We don't need to argue about it. We can just have a match. Bring your 38 and your Weaver. I'll bring my 45 and my isosceles. We'll see who wins.
And when did USPSA spring off of IPSC?
I want to say, I don't know the exact year, but basically USPSA had a few different ideas from IPSC, which was the international organization. If I had to guess, I'd say late 80s, mid 90s in there somewhere, USPSA split off. Please don't quote me. I'm not 100% sure, but in there somewhere, the 80s, 90s. And like typical Americans, we said, hey, we want to do things our own way. We got a few different ideas.
Yeah. Did IPSC, do they use the human-shaped targets?
No.
Like USPSA? They don't do that.
No, they use what's called the classic target, which looks like a stop sign. Yeah, turtle target. Yeah, it looks like a stop sign. And that's only because most international outside of American countries will prohibit using a humanoid target.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where the whole thing got started. And you're getting beat by 2 seconds and being confused. You are running fast and shooting fast, but that only works to a certain extent. And then you got to start doing things soon. You got to start blending those positions, and you got to start shooting while moving, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I did get to where I could shoot and move pretty good, but if I didn't keep moving, I was in trouble. Yeah.
You want to know what the best way to learn to do that is?
Huh.
So if somebody's interested in learning to shoot better while they're moving, the easiest thing to do is to do it until you forget you're moving. I've only learned that like the last 5 years or so, and maybe 3. I used to take people out. Okay, here's how you shoot while moving. And if it's new, it's kind of a disaster at first because they're thinking about everything.
Yeah.
But then about 2 years ago, I realized if we do this for about an hour, they'll forget they're moving. And then the scores go way up. Like it's like flipping a switch. 45 minutes into it.
They just move for every drill you're doing?
Yeah, they just shoot while they're moving. And the great thing is 45 minutes into it, they forget they're moving and it goes back to sight and trigger and the scores go way up. But you have to do it till you forget you're moving. If you're thinking about your feet, you can't shoot well.
Yeah.
Right. If you're thinking, okay, I got to roll from the heel to my toe. Okay, I got to be really gentle. You can't shoot well when you have all those thoughts. But if you've now forgotten that you're moving, and if anybody owns a treadmill, it's so easy to put a dry fire target in front of your treadmill and you can learn to do it that way too, because you'll forget you're moving very quickly. Just be careful turning 360 degrees on a treadmill because that's hard to do. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, you can fall down.
You'll be on YouTube fails channel if you do that.
For sure. Another thing I had problems with is when I'd make the decision to shoot the whole stage moving because I figured I could do it. And I would sometimes, but I'd see these other guys and they take 2 positions and they beat me. How do you make the decision? Is it better to take the position or keep moving? I mean, is there any kind of a formula that you?
That is one of the most common questions people ask. And so that question needs to start with one of 2 assumptions. Typically, people that ask that question have the assumption that they can't make the shot while they're moving and they're more confident posting up. Okay, standing still. But if you can make the shot, okay, it's usually better to stay moving. But moving doesn't mean running, and it doesn't mean walking quickly. Moving means avoiding stopping. So we do a thing I call the creep. I don't know if I can try to stand up and show you. There might be a little bit of noise. All right. I'm going to take my heads off. I'm going to take the headphones off for just a minute, okay?
Okay.
All right. So here's my perfect stance, right? This is perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So this is what's slow. People will get where they're going. They'll come in like this, and they'll stand up and shoot. Okay. And then when they want to leave, they'll come back down and then they'll go. Those things take time. So the first thing we want to do is learn to shoot here. So now I've arrived, my body's low, my gun's high, I can shoot immediately. Okay. And moving is really just as simple as avoiding this perfect setup, right? So I could literally be doing this on a more difficult target. I'm moving, right? Or I could be moving literally this slowly, just moving my body across because I'm continuing to go the direction that I want to go. And if you watch the very best shooters in the sport, once they establish movement, they don't really ever go to a perfect setup. They might pause, right? So once again, if I'm coming across here quickly, I might just pause. But what I'm not going to do is get a perfect stance, right? I'll be creeping across here, pause, boom, I'm good, off I go. Versus most people come in, oh, I can't make this shot. Now I can make it. And that's obviously exaggerated, but that's where most of the time in the sport is above A class.
Huh. Interesting.
And we can show people that very, very quickly. We call that prairie dogging. So prairie dogging is where you get where you're going and you stand completely up in a perfect stance, like a little prairie dog. You got lots of those in Montana, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you mean. Can you describe the deal on your face-to-face class? Like, people can go to your website, they can buy the 3 books, they can go to your YouTube channel, they can watch your podcast, and they can get everything. But if they want face-to-face training, can you tell us about that deal?
Sure. There's 2 ways to do it. If somebody is already into competition, either IDPA, USPSA, Steel Challenge, I can come to your range, to your club, and do the class at your location. We need a certain number of people, obviously, to do that. If you're anywhere near Newark, Ohio, which is 30 minutes east of Columbus, you can come to my range here in Newark, Ohio. And all you got to do is send me an email, steve@andersonshooting.com. I love, love, love new shooters. My 2 favorite, well, there's 3, and this might be everybody. My 3 favorite kinds of shooters to work with are, hey, I'm brand new. What should I do? Okay. My buddy Joey Sauerland came to me 2 years ago, brand new to USPSA. And 2 years later, he's won at least 6 state championships and at least 2 area championships. And that's in 2 years with less than 3,000 rounds of ammunition. So bring me your new shooters. I'll take them as far as they want to go. My second favorite kind is the older shooter who's just getting into competition. Say you're 55, 60 or something like that, or 50 for sure, and you want to get into competition. Those folks don't have 20 years to screw around. They need to figure this stuff out pretty quick. And then my other favorite kind is the competition shooter who's really fast and really sloppy. Those are my 3 favorite ones, because I can work miracles with those guys. Well, I should say we can work miracles together. It ain't just me.
I'm going to post a question here. Tuco from Canadian Cowboy. Tuco, can you add links to Steve Anderson books and videos? I'll do that later. Right now in the description of this video, there's a link to his channel. You can watch his videos there for free. And there's a link to his website where you can order his books.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little warning. The podcasts that you see on my channel are mostly about the mental game of competition shooting. So if you're kind of a casual shooter, you're new to competition, those podcasts are good for you, but there's not a lot of actual gun instruction, because there's not a lot of gun instruction you can do in a podcast format, right? Those podcasts are mostly about the mental game, which, as you learned, that's the whole thing. Once you've got the skill, it's 100% mental, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only guy in the industry talking about that stuff. Everybody else says, hold your feet like this, hold your hand like this. I'm saying work your brain like this, because if you work your brain correctly, what your foot doing isn't near as important, you know.
Yeah. You were talking about the mental game. I'm going to tell you an experience that I had, and you could. I know what happened, but I want you to explain it. In 2020, in the spring, I started shooting better than I'd ever shot before. I won I won my division 2 matches in a row, and then I immediately became extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, of
And then
course.
I started to struggle for the next few matches. I didn't
Well,
bomb, but I could tell for some reason, I was uncomfortable.
hmm
Tell us what that's about.
so, all right, shooting performance in anything is made up of your thoughts, your skill, and your confidence. That's the easiest way to explain it. Okay. You were doing really well because you were controlling what you were thinking about. You were thinking about the right things and you had a high level of skill. What made you uncomfortable is you outperformed your confidence. Okay. Your confidence level said it gave you a comfort zone. Hey, I normally finish right about here. It's not what you want, but it's where you're comfortable. And then you do better than that. You may not know what you did or how you did it, and you may be afraid that you won't be able to do it again.
Hmm.
Right. And that's because your performance actually exceeded your confidence. And we do a whole thing called mental management, where we go into extreme detail on what happens. But basically, every thought you have about your shooting goes into this confidence bank, right? So if you say, I'm in A class, I'm pretty good, but I could never beat that guy. Well, that's a fact in your confidence level. So if
Hmm.
you do happen to beat that guy for whatever reason,
Feels weird.
because it's not what you programmed, right?
Hmm.
It's just like if we go back to the example of talking to the hot girl in high school. If I'm talking to the hot girl in high school and she says, "Of course I'll go out with you," I won't know what to do next because that's the last thing in the world I thought was going to happen. And one time that actually happened to me, by the way. During my rock and roll days, back in the long haired days of rocker, that happened to me a couple of times. I decided to go with it. I'm not going to question this, but you can fix that in training by controlling your thoughts, right? So as you're training, you can think, you know what, I deserve to do better because of all the work I'm doing. I deserve to beat these guys when I get it right. That way you're preparing yourself. It's actually called self-image, but you're preparing your self-image for this higher level of performance so it doesn't freak you out.
Hmm.
And so, what in competition, it's very common for shooters not to want to look at the scores during the match because it freaks them out. Well,
Yeah.
that's why. If
Yeah.
they're doing better than they expected, and this is the irony, if you're doing better than expected, why would you change something? But
Hmm.
frequently, people find out they're doing better than expected, and they go changing stuff.
Hmm.
So people don't do it at work. Hey, we're having the best work day ever. Let's do something different. That never happens at work. You don't do
Yeah.
that. You don't do that on your channel. Hey, I have more subscribers than ever. I know. Let's take up basket weaving videos. You wouldn't, but
Yeah.
shooters do it all the time.
Yeah.
Shooters do it all the time. And that's because they don't know what they're doing when they get what they want. They
Yeah.
literally don't know. They chalk it up to luck or what they had for breakfast or a new bullet or a new spring or a new gun. They don't know what they did different up here to get what they wanted.
Or
You have
sometimes
to
they,
know
they
that.
go to the match expecting a bad stage, and they're not comfortable until they get it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Isn't that weird? Like, so we have these things called classifiers, right? And classifiers is where the organizing body for the sport compares your performance to everybody else in the sport, and that's where the rankings come from, right? And people get really anxious about them, right? So they're like, oh, I always mess up the classifier. Man, I take a mic every time. This time is going to be, oh, I screwed it up like I always do. And it's not what they wanted, but it is what they were projecting with their thoughts,
Hmm.
right? It's just like if you wake up in a bad mood and decide it's going to be a bad day, it's going to be a bad day. But if
Hmm.
you wake up in a bad mood and say, you know what, I can shake this off. Let's have a good day. You can change it. Now, obviously,
You
you
know,
can't change everything about it.
one of the things that I had before I took your training is as I got to where I was afraid of the no shoots,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized I was focusing on the no shoots, and I was saying to myself, "Don't hit the no shoot," instead of hit the A zone, hit the scoreable part of the target,
Mm-hmm.
and your eyes actually drawn to it, and you would hit the A zone or
Every time.
the no shoot
Mm-hmm.
consistently because you're
Yep.
focused on it. And learn to focus on the scoring zone. And then I
Yeah.
and then I finally got to where I wasn't seeing the no shoots anymore. I was just seeing
Yep.
the scoring zone.
So just for some of your listeners who may not know, it's very common to have a target that looks like this. Okay. What you want is 2 bullets here. Okay. But if you get 2 bullets here, it's minus 10 points off your score for each bullet that goes here, plus another minus 10 points for the miss. So a shot here when it's supposed to be here is very, very bad. And what he's talking about is he's looking at this. He wants his bullet to go here, but he's so afraid of hitting this, it's all he can see. So what we teach people to do, number one, is we quit saying no shoots. Instead, we refer to partials. Okay. So once you start thinking about partials, now all you see is this. And you won't even see these anymore. Just like you said, once you learned how to do it, you didn't even see them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Yeah. We could have fixed that very, very quickly. And one thing I learned relatively late in my career is, and I should have known this sooner, right? But a little bit more visual reference here. One big mistake I was making is I would try to put the bullet here instead of here, right? This is a much safer place to shoot in the scoring zone than here. I'd be aiming right here at the A zone. Any trigger problem or grip problem puts those bullets down here. But if I'm aiming up here, it's much, much safer. Right. And everybody says, well, Charlie's not with as many points. Well, I'm no math whiz, but I think it's way better than 2 mics and 2 no shoots. Right.
Yeah. Or if it took forever to get the alpha, then
that's the other problem. Is it
anyway?
That's right. It takes much, much longer. And that's just one of the few things I've learned over the years.
We got a question here from Bell Cool Mountain. Why does Steve Anderson choose the Walther PDP pistol?
I'll tell you exactly why. Walther was interested in sponsoring my podcast, and I was not using Walther at that time, and I didn't know anything about the PDP. I'd heard of it, but I was approached by Walther through a mutual friend of ours, Jay Beal, and Walther said, "Hey, we'd like you to check out our gun, and if you like it, we'd like to sponsor your podcast." And I said, "Great, send me a gun." And they sent me a gun, and I fell in love with it immediately. And whether people choose to believe this or not, anytime I do an endorsement, it always starts with send me the product. Because if I do not like the product, I have turned down so many dry fire endorsements. I've turned down virtually every dry fire gadget that exists. If you can think of a dry fire gadget, I've turned them down for an endorsement. And while I can tell you more about that if you want, but the greatest thing about the Walther PDP is it's designed for the human hand. Like if you pick up a Glock, it's okay, but it feels kind of like a 2x4. And whereas the Walther, you just pick that sucker up and it's designed for the human hand. I just love it. And mine still has the stock trigger. I've got a Vortex optic on it. I just think it's a great gun.
How would you compare it to the SIG 320, the Legion version?
So it's a little lighter, but again, the way it fits the hand, and I've never been one of these, oh, it's got to fit the hand. I just always made do with whatever it was. But when you find something that does fit your hand, it's pretty powerful. To add a little extra weight, I put a brass heel, brass back strap on mine to put a little extra weight on there. The other thing is the Walther curved trigger is much easier to shoot accurately than the straight triggers. Those straight curved triggers on striker fired guns like the Legions have, those are harder guns to shoot accurately for me than a traditional curved trigger.
Yeah, what's interesting is I selected the curved trigger also. I couldn't see a reason to go with the flat trigger. I never even really tried one. And on the SIG 320, the upgraded trigger is super light. Mm-hmm. I was at a steel match on stage 2. It broke in half.
Oh, wow.
That really sucked.
That's uncool.
But that only happened the one time.
Yeah. But
skinny,
Oh, the one thing I want to say about Walther before we leave that subject is it's the only gun in the industry that I'm aware of, the whole Walther pistol line, that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Anything else you buy, if you don't like it, you're kind of stuck with it. You got to sell it used or trade it in. Walther will literally give you your money back on the PDP and all the other Walther pistols if you don't like it. Pretty cool. And that was the other reason, because I worked in a gun store for a long time, and so many times, hey, I bought this, I don't really like it. They think it's like a pair of shoes that you can try on and bring back. It doesn't really work that way with guns.
Yeah.
And I had to tell so many people, I'm sorry, I can take it on trade for half what you paid for it, but I can't take it back or give you a refund. Walther, you can.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's neat.
All righty. Was there anything else you wanted to cover, Steve?
Man, I could do this for hours. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about the mental side. One thing I do want to tell people is that if you're having an accuracy problem of any kind, it's either sight or trigger. And if you can learn to diagnose that, you can diagnose most of your accuracy problems. And how do you know the difference? Well, if your sights were on target and you know it and you missed the shot, it has to be trigger. That means you move that gun as you press that trigger. And if it's sight, well, that just means, hey, I know for a fact that wasn't a good enough sight picture. Because iron sight shooters do a funny thing, right? They fire a shot on a sight picture they know is not good, and then they expect a good hit. Did you ever do that when you were shooting iron sights?
Actually, I don't remember. I wasn't a very good shooter until I went to the dot.
Oh,
It was a blur. I didn't learn to call shots until I started shooting with a dot.
yeah.
So,
But like iron sight shooters will literally fire a shot with the sights doing this, and then they can't figure out why the steel didn't go down. I mean, come on, man. So you got to be honest with yourself about what you're seeing. And if you can diagnose sight or trigger, man, you can diagnose a lot of these problems. But yeah, have people contact me, steve@andersonshooting.com. I love new competition shooters. We're out here in Newark, Ohio, very near Columbus, Ohio. We can save you years of struggle. I promise.
Got another question here. AR American, he's a friend of mine. What's your thoughts on the 1911?
I love them. I absolutely love them. A 9mm 1911 is probably the easiest and most fun gun to shoot in the world. So absolutely love the 1911. I think they're great. As long as they work, right? They just have to work. And most of that has to do with which magazines you're using and bullet profiles and things like that. I personally don't have a need for a 45 cartridge, but if you like a 45, it's a great cartridge, does a lot of great things. I have a Springfield TRP operator, 9mm 1911. It's my wife's favorite gun to shoot. It's an easy gun to shoot straight because of the way the trigger's designed, right? The trigger goes back instead of curving. And of course, the 2011s that are popular in competition, same design, basically, just double stack mag. So yeah, AR American, I love the 1911. I think they're great, as long as they work.
That was my experience when I shot the 1911 a little bit. Is that even if you got them working, sooner or later they wouldn't be working. Your magazines would wear a little bit, and the plastic pistols are just way more reliable. For me, that was my experience.
Well, what's funny is my wife would shoot that Springfield TRP, loved it. She goes, I want this to be my carry gun. And I'd say, absolutely not. And she'd say, why not? And then it would jam because she limp wristed it. And I'd say, that's why. That's why. Because number one, you got to carry it cocked and locked or empty chamber or hammered down. I don't like any of those things for a purse gun. But they're so easy to shoot straight. As long as it works, I love them. Absolutely love them.
All righty, Steve. We've been on for an hour. I think we'll sign off. I want to remind everybody, please go and subscribe to Steve. His channel link is in the description of this video, if you would, please. He's got a lot of good tips on there for you. Great videos to see. He recently posted a video where he reacts to the beeper, draws and shoots the man-sized target right in the kill zone 6 times in a second and a half. Expert level is 2 seconds or better, and he shaved a whole half second off that. So you got to see that.
And that was our first shot of 0.62. So
that's 62, right, 62 draw, 0.62
62
draw.
hundredths of a second for the first shot. Yeah.
Yep.
My best one on that day was a 0.55, which is the best first shot I've ever had.
Wow.
Because I was down there working on the first shot for a little while. And the reason I did that is we're going to have a side match at Carry Optics Nationals that is that. And one of my friends who's on Team Beretta asked the question, are we going to see it done in under a second? And so I went down to find out what that looks like. And what that requires is a first shot in the 40s. And then
what's the drill? It's the bill drill, or?
Yep, draw and fire 6 shots at 5 yards. And the question is, do we think it can be done in under a second? And that was what I went down to answer, because that requires a first shot in the 0.4s, right? 4/10 of a second. And then your time between shots can't be any more than 1/10 of a second. And I concluded, for me, that's not possible right now.
Yeah, the fastest draw I ever did with a scoop draw was a 0.68.
Yeah,
and that's fast. I mean, so
that's extremely fast. Yeah. So my buddy Mark Sue in Oregon did a 1.11 bill drill.
Wow.
And I don't remember the first shot, but he shoots a CZ Shadow 2, and they have an extremely short reset. Right. So that's an easier gun to shoot fast than a striker fired gun that has to move the trigger so much.
Right.
And he's just an extremely fast shooter. So really nicely done. Oh, and by the way, if you're ever doing a fast drill, like a bill drill or something like that, have you ever had trigger freeze when you're trying to do a bill drill or something fast?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about trigger freeze real quick.
Okay.
Trigger freeze is tension in the firing hand that's caused by trying to go fast. As soon as you think about going fast, this hand tightens up, and that isolates this finger and renders it frozen, basically. That's why they call it trigger freeze. Okay. If you'll do one of two things or both, if you'll think about your support hand instead of your strong hand, and then just count to 6 with your trigger finger, trigger freeze usually goes away. So in other words, make the goal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to, I gotta do this as fast as possible. That's what causes trigger freeze.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had that a lot. Freezing up. And my trigger finger it's not very fast. My fastest split probably 17.
Mm-hmm. Which is more than fast enough for anything in competition. Anything. And it's not fast enough for a 1 second bill drill, but we're not even sure that's 100%. Oh, I even did an experiment. Let me know if maybe your viewers can tell me if they want to see this or not. To see if a 1 second bill drill is even possible, I took my open gun and I started aimed at the target instead of a draw. Yeah. And then I reacted to the start tone and fired 6 shots. The best I could do was 103 starting aimed at the target. Wow. And that was with a 0.2 first shot. So that's a great reaction time.
Yeah.
So do you think I should post that video?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll post it as a short, you think?
Yeah. I would post any good shooting videos as a short, because every once in a while you'll hook up on the algorithm and you'll get 50,000, 100,000 views. And you don't know what it's going to be. But it's usually not a talking video. It's going to be a shooting video that really, really blows up and gets you a lot of subs.
Okay. Yeah, I'll post it later today. Well, I sure have enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything else I can do for you?
That's all I can think of to now, unless there's some more questions. I don't see any here.
Well, nobody has asked Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth yet. We usually get that one about this time. Once they see the Van Halen tattoo, we usually get Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth. I'll be happy to answer that one too.
All righty, Steve. We'll go ahead and end the broadcast, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, my pleasure. If anybody has any questions,